Oh, is it not?
Our next one. Oh, no way.
That's what I said.
Oh,
Thank you for she's.
let's wait for it to connect.
About what they've done. We're gonna do a.
Is this not on? Hey.
You're supposed to sit together.
No,
Are we supposed to?
you don't have, no, you don't have to sit with me. No.
You always want to sit with me.
No, it's,
You know, they get first off and they mention, so I make my note. Now, at the end.
yeah.
Now we're good. Okay, so now I'm going to.
I don't know. Questions, but only. So.
So these people are just over here, right? And you can just, whatever. And then, you can just advance, you know. Enter in, okay. And then just go back. And then, if there's any things, I can put it in the chat, so you just open it up and then you can read whatever it says. And then I'll ask you, Susan, do you have anything like that?
So it'll have.
Now, the other option is to sit right here.
Taxation without.
That'd probably be the best. So you can-
The other thing is, some of the other. Yeah, there's.
There you go.
So. You asked me about getting our. There's something a lot of wheelchair.
We all get ready.
She's got some new. So she.
Oh, okay, so you're doing that, I'm doing.
I'm doing that.
I'm doing this.
You're right.
I saved a place for you. Oh, you did?
And then you're
Hope you don't mind sitting next to this. Oh, my God.
But they.
What have I written?
I wonder if I rented this plan and that is.
Oh, hi. Oh, thank you. That's not your name. I'm pretty sure I voted for you. It's not your name.
I Sometimes it boils down to that. Been there. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
I hope, well, I think I gotta make sure that
Right, well, I'm wondering if.
How you doing, Scott?
I am terrific, thank you.
You're terrific.
I'm terrific. Oh, every day is a great day. Some of it's great. Well, I represent you. Hey, I, you know, it's funny, I actually truly believe. I'm the face of it. You know, I was pretty serious. So when I go out, I feel really good. I rarely wear shorts when I play golf. I almost always wear because that's kind of the step. And what's really kind of fun is that, you know, sometimes I'll just throw and I will just wear my t-shirt and my shorts and my walk out. And members will really right by me. I know, but yeah, I was just pretty so
When I had charges, if I went to the supermarket, the oranges, you were. It's just one.
I did see one guy, I literally, I think I had a ball cap, I had a t-shirt, and I had a pair of like golf shoes. And I walked by them, the one amount of contact that I don't feel like, but I don't look the way I feel like I should look, right? And she looks at me, she's like, stop. Oh, don't think of me like that. No, we're not human. We're in here. We're yeah, every once in a while I float down and enjoy my home and that's when I get home. But yeah, so my wife and I have a routine. So when I usually work pretty much 6 days, a lot of nights when I hear 7 o'clock. So never to the TV. So as soon as I get home, we never to the TV. So typically we have a 3-hand gin almost every night. We play 3 hands of gin and we drink things off the wall and just kind of chit chat. Well, what we do is, and you might see it now, but whoever wins 2 or 3 wears the crown. So I'm currently wearing the crown. And so when Becky takes me, then I take the crown off and I put the crown on her and she's like, oh, okay. I'm currently wearing the crown. So when I'm not sleeping. No wonder you're standing about it. Oh, I think the crown.
You don't, it's that kind of. It's like yours.
And I have to say, I have been. And I don't know what it is, but you know, it just kind of switches. Like I'll win and then it resolves into right. But I used to feel bad about it, and then they switched, and I'm like.
Blood goes up, comes down.
Yeah.
1 minute.
You got 2 minutes.
Nineteenth century stuff. I went to the Missouri State Convention, Sacred Heart Convention.
And then.
Church. It's not an Episcopal church. It's
The other kind of like make funny sounds.
It's a type of Episcopal notation. Old-fashioned. I got to this event.
They don't.
Got to it late. Coming in the door.
Well.
Also, the rest of the guys are the non-ecclesiastic. Turns out it was a Sacred Heart. So we come in.
Okay, that's the start.
We said to each other, what are you doing here?
You just don't.
Then I sat for all afternoon singing.
Oh, so did you put your groups together and all?
That was already, was I was gonna do a show at our. So we had to make a group of training. So. I said, whatever day was. Singing.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you to those of you who came to, kind of our follow-up, I think, on ARB. So I think, I've been on the job for 15 days when we did our first ARB guidelines. And, it was a good meeting. It kind of started the whole Perscpectives series where we get up and we talk a little bit and try to build some awareness around the things that we're thinking about. I want to go back, well, let me go to my next slide. So, these meetings, we got a few rules. No more than an hour and 15 minutes, so the hope is that we can keep it to that, and then we'll actually try to call the official meeting. We'll stick around and answer some questions and what such as best we can, but I try to keep meetings to an hour and 15, not a town hall. This is not a member meeting. This is a chance for us just to kind of talk to you, listen to you. We're not gonna be able to, we're not gonna answer every single question. We're not gonna address every concern. What we're really doing is saying, here's what we've heard. These are the guidelines that we're gonna be working through. The ARB will be doing some working sessions. And then we'll figure out if we have a particular guideline we need more work on. I always like the fact that we can respect each other's perspective, even if we don't share it. And this is, individual topics of interest beyond ARB. This isn't that meeting. So we're really gonna focus on the guidelines and ARB as a subject tonight, so. Okay, so I wrote a letter. I usually write a letter after each of my perspective meetings, one to remember what I heard a few months later. And I wanted to go back through, some of the major things that were brought to our attention was, we wanna know why. So if we can't do this, or if we can do this, we want to know why. And I think ARB has taken that really seriously. New buyers should be given the ARB guidelines. So we have an entire packet now for new buyers. They have to sign this thing, and we have it for the realtors in advance, has all of our governing documents, has our ARB guidelines. It tells people that we have a waiting list for a marina. So we really feel like we've made a good effort. And one of the things with the Marcom committee next year is we're bringing a realtor onto our Marcom. So we can really make sure we up our game when it comes to informing people who are thinking about becoming part of our community, what's going on here. So ARB guidelines are perceived as interpreted differently for each property. That's a tough one. I think the goal really was to get as much subjectivity out of the guidelines as humanly possible. It's a little impossible to do completely, but I think it's been cleaned up quite a bit. And I'm gonna speak to something that might clarify this a little more also. ARB is to help members improve their property with a focus on what can be done. So one of the things that has taken place is we're having conceptual discussions with people before they start to invest a lot of money. So one member had said he had spent a bunch of money and then it got turned down. He spent some more money and then it got turned down. ARB now has gone out to members who bring in kind of conceptual, say, hey, this is what I'd like to do, before they start engaging an architect and spending a lot of money. So I believe we've really kind of improved upon that also. One of the ones that jumped out was dedicated to completing a 30-day review period by our members. So last year on the 19th, I had announced to the members that we have already submitted to the county on January 10th, which is what we do every single year. This year we went ahead and did the guidelines, got them out to the members. Bruce Weinberg and Tim are going to cover that process a little bit, but we really believe in having some period of review. It's nice to know what the conversation is in advance of approvals. And then when we know what that is, we can have a civil conversation and we can compromise. Once we approve something and then that happens, that doesn't work that well. So we went ahead and did the 30-day review with the ARB guidelines. I would anticipate that we do this again in the future. I don't think it'll be quite to the degree. One member had asked for a red line version, and it was so different that it was virtually impossible to red line. ARB is about subjectivity. How to best organize the ARB guidelines to present the information in a way that's more easily navigated, and I'll speak to that in a second. And then processes that bring us to your homes and on your property to help devise solutions for improvement. So I think we've really responded. Those were all the suggestions that were made by the members in our prospective meeting. And I really feel like the ARB guidelines have, the ARB activity has really changed the point where, you know, our job is to help. Click the next slide. So let me kind of change your perspective a little bit. I think ARB gets a little bit of a black eye because of community pride. Community pride is me. It's not ARB. It's administration, okay? So we go to ARB, if we go out in community pride and we need to, we've reminded somebody we need to levy a fine, then we go to the ARB as our thought partners to say, here's what we've done, here's the letters we've written, here's what we are advising you, we're thinking about doing, and the ARB might come back and say, yeah, we agree or we don't agree. That's the role of ARB with community pride. Now, one of the things we did this year, the first time, was we sent a letter out to all the members saying, we're coming. Here's 8 bullets we'd like you to look at before we come out. And with that, we had a significant drop in the number of letters that went out. So a previous year when we didn't tell people we were coming, we wrote 200 letters. After we said, hey, we're gonna be coming out in the next 30 days, and these are the things we'd like you to look at, we dropped down to like 70 letters. So it's really good for us to let you know that we're coming out, and these are the things we look at. So I really wanna clarify the fact that we don't wanna throw tomatoes at ARB, because community pride is me, it's really not ARB. So I want people to understand that. We will continue to say, hey, we're coming out in the next 30 days. I think we did it in next week at the Creek for the one we're doing now. I think, you know, we'll always do an independent email and a reminder next week at the Creek just to make sure people know that we're coming out. And it helps us too, because it dropped our number of letters significantly. So any questions about community pride? We're definitely proud of our community, and we work with people. We have people that are away or whatever, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to get people to just kind of keep things in some modicum of presentation, I guess I would say. So what's the next one? Okay, so I'm gonna introduce Bruce. So I did my first perspective on the 19th. It was lively. There was maybe 5 times you all here. To me, I like to think this is a bit of a victory lap. I think we responded to those people that were in the room. I think we had 130 people show up for that one. So started looking at saying, okay, what are we gonna do? And we were gifted with Bruce Feinberg. It's hard to hear people say nice things about you, but that's what he's about to get. So Bruce has been a very solid thought partner for me. You know, these are people that are willing to sit behind the scenes and debate and argue and hash this stuff out. And Bruce brought such a level of professionalism and his experience to do this. So as we started going through it, we really kind of did start redlining it, and we realized it needs a full overhaul. And so our hope is that the formatting for the ARB guidelines is a little more friendly to your eyeball, that you can work your way through it a little bit. You know, we think we made a giant leap in the right direction. We probably have a couple mini leaps ahead of us, but I am so appreciative of Bruce and Jan and I can't tell you the number of hours that went into this thing, and I think we paid you 0 for it, Bruce, so thank you for that. So much work went into this, and I think the product is better than it was before. But I'm gonna turn it over to Bruce, and Bruce, I can't thank you enough. You made a big difference for us. Thank you.
I'm gonna use the podium, if that's okay. It's nice to see everybody this evening. And like to see a few more people, but you know, it is what it is. We've got almost as many committee members here as we have participants, but I just like to maybe give a little bit more of an introduction because we are relatively new here. As Scott said, my name is Bruce Feinberg, and my wife Karen and I, we live at 2 Donovan Drive on beautiful Henry's Pond. We became part of the Moss Creek community in February of 2023. So we're just coming up on 2 years. We have two sons, two wonderful granddaughters, three wonderful grandsons, and a princess. And so, as such, we split our time, obviously, to go back and see the kids. We split our time between here and a suburb of Chicago. Geneva, Illinois is our other home. So I'd just like to start off by saying a big thank you to Scott, certainly to Jan and to Tim as thought partners, as well as the rest of the ARB, for putting their vote of confidence in me, the newbie, to sort of engineer this revision process. Being able to lead the effort, I think, provided me the opportunity to really jump in feet first and to learn firsthand, the ins and the outs of a committee that's really responsible for working very closely, as Scott alluded to, working with members on improvements to their properties. Oops.
Oh, I think, yeah.
So I thought we'd start off, get the energy up in the room a little bit with a little quiz, if we could. So the first question, anyone care to venture a guess as to what 1042 might represent?
Number of
Number of
homes,
properties.
the lots in here.
Wow, number of homes currently in Wall Street, fantastic. By the way, there's no prizes. Oh, yeah, you just get recognized, so thanks very much for blurting that out. How about the number 19?
Vacant lots.
Wow, sharp group. And what about 4? Wow, I think you get the prize. I don't know what that might be, but a drink or something. It's on Tim. So with that information, 1042, 19, and 4, it really shouldn't come as any surprise as to why we reorganized the 2025 ARB guidelines to really lean into repairing, replacing, and refurbishing. Whereas the old guidelines really leaned into new residential construction. So we sort of flipped that. We didn't make residential construction go away. We just repositioned it within the new document. So since this is a perspectives meeting, I'd like to share my perspective for your consideration. My perspective is the past is the past. The past reminds us of where we've been, the successes we've had, the opportunities for improvement that we might want to consider moving forward. But to successfully navigate the future, our focus needs to be out the windshield, watching and preparing for what's coming at us. Occasionally, as you drive your car, occasionally you glance into the rearview mirror. But the rearview mirror in this particular instance really serves to help us to understand where we've been, right? Not where we're going. And so my perspective is that, some of the old tapes about the prior ARB process, about inconsistencies or perceived decisions is sort of like driving your car while looking in the rearview mirror. It works when you're backing up, but it doesn't really let you safely or successfully move forward. And so I hope you would all agree that leaving the old tapes behind is critically important to allowing us to give the new process a chance. With that said, we spent the past 10 or so months now working on the guidelines, and I would like to suggest that the ARB guidelines and the process itself is an imperfect process that's consistently inconsistent. But when you think about it, realistically, given the size and the scope and everything else of the community, could we really expect it to be any more? I mean, within our community, there's no 2 properties or projects or locations or tree removals or whatever it might be. There's no 2 situations that are the same. And so how could we think to have a process that was going to address every single process the same? I would submit that, if we were in the manufacturing business and we were making, ball peen hammers, we would have specifications, we wouldn't have guidelines. And every single one of those hammers would be exactly the same. But that's not the case with the ARB. We're not making hammers, we're making decisions based on information that's provided by the owners that represent unique and individual, very much individual situations. So again, I think it's an imperfect process that's consistently inconsistent, which isn't to say that it's broken. It's just to say that it's really complicated. And so what I'd suggest is that while the 2025 proposed guidelines represent some significant improvement, as Scott alluded to, they're still far from perfect. And I would guess we have more than a few tiny tweaks, in the future to make them better. It's a continuous improvement process. I'd also submit that perfect is the enemy of good, meaning that if we wait around until we get these guidelines to truly be perfect, we're all gonna have moved on, right? So perfect is the enemy of good, and I would guess too that for what we hope to accomplish, good is probably good enough. So let me talk about the change process. The team assigned to the revision adopted a change process, as you might expect. That guided the revisions that were pushed out to you for your review this past September. The team identified 3 goals. The first, to simplify; the second, to organize; and the third, to prioritize. To simplify, we stripped out a lot of redundancy. We traded legalese for plain speak, and we created an appendix to house project applications and checklists that work to your benefit to speed up the approval process. To organize, we created a table of contents that allowed members to quickly and easily identify where the information resides in the new document. And then to prioritize, we moved those projects that are most important to you, like exterior painting or new decks or tree removal, to the front of the document, and we moved new residential construction to the back of the document. Because as we've already seen through the numbers, new residential construction really plays a back seat to everything else that goes on in terms of improvement projects. We also created an administrative review process that can expedite an application's approval for certain projects. And that's done by Jan, the ARB chair, and by Susan. This process can be done between the ARB meetings, which the ARB meets every other Monday. And it's really meant to help you to get quicker resolution to any of the applications that you might submit for approval. So what was the result of all of this work, and what's the benefit to you, which is what I think you're really concerned about. The new version of the guidelines is organized into 5 parts. For those of you that dived into the document, that might have been very, very obvious. For those that didn't, just a quick review this evening. And although the document is still 50+ pages long, the good news is that the meat and potatoes, it's within the first 11 pages. So if you can get through those first 11 pages, you've got the lion's share of the document. The rest is all just detail. Part 1 provides an introduction to the ARB and the guidelines themselves, general provisions that every member should be familiar with. We created some definitions to get everyone on the same page. And again, that vitally important table of contents that allows you to identify where in the guidelines is the information that you seek and allows you to get to that really quick. Part two reintroduces the Community Pride Program, which Scott touched on, highlighting owners' responsibilities and addresses how guidelines are reinforced and when necessary, how fines get collected. Part three contains specific details about any exterior project that you might be considering that might require ARB approval before you get started. Part four is a cut and paste from the previous document covering new home construction, but again, moved to the back of the document. And part five is an appendix that contains forms and schedules. Now, this is the biggest change from previous versions of the ARB, because we've created, with Susan's help, project-specific applications. Prior to that, we had to sort of shoehorn lots of different projects into just a very few applications. So now we've got very specific applications for things like exterior painting, tree removal, landscape lighting, whatever it is you might be thinking about. We now have an application for that. And I think the even better news is that on each application, we've created a checklist, not a virtual checklist, but a virtual checklist where you can tick the box at the bottom of the form. The nicety about this is it tells you as the member exactly what supporting information you might need. Again, to help speed up the process. You give the ARB the information one time, allow them to review it, and we're able to get you your approval on your application as quickly as possible. Next steps. So our next steps are to digest the information that was provided during the review process since September. I suspect with Jan and Tim's support, we'll have to go back and do a little bit of tweaking to the current document that you all reviewed. Our goal then would be to present that final document to the board for their review and ultimately for their approval. And then again, as Scott alluded to, file with the county in early January and put these new ARB guidelines into practice in January. So as I said, it's a complicated process. I'm confident though that if we work together, we can make it extremely successful. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Thanks, Bruce. An awful lot of working sessions, an awful lot of computer time at home, tremendous amount of work went into this rewrite. And Bruce, we can't thank you enough. I'd like to thank Bruce and the rest of you. This was a pretty big effort. I think the end result that we're seeing is that it should be, and I believe it is, much easier to read through, follow, and understand what's exactly required when you need to do something on the exterior of your house. So we've had a lot of feedback. Susanna, can you bring up the next slide? So we had 9 emails with suggestions. We thought we would get inundated with hundreds, but that didn't happen. So we've had 9 emails with suggestions. We've detailed each one. Couple of them were really more thank yous and suggestions. And what we'll do next is take all of those. We'll have a working session where we digest them and discuss them and see what we need to do even furthermore to the guidelines to make sure that we take all these things into consideration and include them. I'd just like to give you a couple of examples of experiences I've had as we have changed the processes here that seem to have been pretty well received. So a couple of things. Bruce talked about the administrative review process. So if you want to paint your house, if you want to change your driveway, but not change the footprint of your driveway, just maybe change the materials or the color or whatever. There are applications for that do not require those to come to the ARB meetings. If you get those to Susan and they're complete, then Jan and Susan or Jan and Susan and I would review those. I don't think we've rejected very many that stay within the guidelines. And then you can get on with it and not wait for two weeks for the next meeting. So we're trying to figure out ways to speed things up. We're also trying to come up with some ideas and some ways to try to save people time and money. So one of the things that's been very well received is we don't really have an official name for it. But we talked today about maybe calling it the conceptual advisory meeting, where we've had people come and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing to my house. I want to put a garage on the back, or I want to put a new screen porch off the back of it or whatever. But I don't want to go hire an architect and spend 5 or 10 grand and then come to the ARB and have the ARB say, no, we're not going to let this happen, right? You've already spent the money. So one of the things I'd like us to be proactive about is if you have an idea, a concept, something that you think you'd like to do, but aren't really sure whether it will be approved, come talk to us. We'll come out to the house. We'll look at whatever drawings you have. We'll discuss it. We had, and one example is we had somebody that wanted to put one of those screen rooms like that goes over a pool, wanted to put that on the back of his house because it's really buggy over there. That type of structure just by itself isn't really allowed. But he came and showed us what he wanted to do, and then we went and looked and said, well, it needs to architecturally be tied into the house. So he went back and he talked to some people that do this kind of thing and came back with some drawings. So before he spent a whole lot of money and time and effort, he was able to bring us something that we said, yeah, if you bring this to us, we're not gonna say no to this. So hopefully that type of process, the administrative review, and the fact that we're more than willing to come out and talk to you guys about what you might want to do to your house, I hope is going to help streamline the process and save you some time. Okay. And with that, I think we'll open it up to any questions or comments you have.
Ryan Thorson, 128 Timber Lane. The conceptual review, that's the one comment I had made, that it was removed from previous ARB guidelines. It's exceptionally helpful if you were building a house or renovating that. You brought it back up, Tim, here as a consideration, but is that only for renovations or is that for new construction as well?
It's actually, I mean, we've had a couple of examples where it's new construction as well. We had somebody come, we've had 2 examples over the last couple months. One was somebody came to us not with architectural drawings, which would have to be submitted with an application, but conceptual drawings of what the house would look like in that particular neighborhood and how it would be placed on the property and the elevations and things, but not with any numbers on them, not with any like heights or widths or anything. Just here's what I'm thinking about building. Is this going to be architecturally acceptable in the community? So then they would go then and, you know, try to get some architectural drawings done. We had another example where we actually did have conceptual plans, not architectural drawings, but conceptual plans of everything related to this property. So it was the site plan, the view of the house on the setbacks, the heights, the widths, all of that kind of stuff. But it was before they would go and spend a whole lot of money starting the project.
So will this be well defined so that it carries on to next year's and continuing ARBs, so that both the committees and the membership understands what's required?
Bruce,
It's
can
not,
you,
it's not an approval though. We don't approve, it's advisory. We're just giving you our suggestions, I guess. It's not an approval.
it's not an approval. The final drawings that come in with the actual application to move forward with the project would be the step after that.
All right, can I explain what happened to us with, we have a lot we owned, and I followed the conceptual review plan my wife and I did procedure. We had gotten it approved year earlier went by ARB, but it had expired. So we went back in for approval and it was very clear what was required. This is the same approval that's allowed by Beaufort County and the OCRM. If you're planning a new house, they'll work with the drainage, the trees, the buffer zones, and even the size of the lots and setbacks and all that. So we went to the ARB for approval of that. We went 3 times, submitted all the information required. And then we learned in the minutes of the meetings, this was in June of 23. But we learned from meetings that the preliminary plan was strictly optional. And we were required then to submit the full engineering plans before ARB would render a decision. It was contrary to what the rules were. It was at that time, rather than spend 25,000 and then have to deal with platers, we decided to sell the property because it was such a problem, such a hassle. So there's just been a lot of inconsistencies, and if you're talking about saving time and money, that's a huge benefit for a new builder or a homeowner. And I don't understand why that was taken out and why it's not going to be submitted and given full approval. So then the next step is to get full drawings, because there's a lot of elements that go into this now, and it costs a ton of money and time for a member.
So what's the question, Brian?
So my question is that I'm hearing now it's not gonna be for approval, so it's just gonna be
Right.
a loosely defined thing where you can proceed now and bring your plans in. You don't get a stamp saying, we like your conceptual plan, now you can proceed. It's just. We went through that, as I said, we left there after hours at ARB meetings confused, and we never did get approval for it.
Okay, I can't speak to something that happened.
That's what I'm saying, going forward, is it
Yeah.
gonna be a full approval or just a sort of a, we'll talk to you and give you our ideas?
There is the possibility, and like I said, you can certainly come in with a concept and say, here's what I'm thinking about doing is, and I'll give you an example. Somebody is currently thinking about making an addition to a garage. And he hasn't had any formal plans drawn up, but he knows that it's gonna require a 3-foot variance to the existing side setback. There is no house on that side of his house. So he brought it to us and said, before I do anything, if I bring the plans to you and they have this 3-foot structure that I'm asking for a variance on, will you say yes or no? So it's not an official approval, but it's like, well, we discussed it and we said, there's nothing on that side of the property other than a creek. It's not visual from any other property, any other yard. It's not gonna disrupt anybody's view of anything. So we'll tell you that if you come and ask for this variance, we're most likely gonna say yes.
I understand, and then it also say, within the guidelines, it'll say that next year's ARB will rule independently, so that you got approval on year 1 for this. That does not mean you're going to get approval the following year with the new ARB. I'm just bringing it back because I've lived through it and seen those issues.
Well, that's not entirely true, because members of the ARB are not on for just a year. They're on for a minimum of 2 years and it rolls, right? So it's unlikely that you would submit a request this year, and with 2 new members coming on next year, it would be rejected.
What happened was, it happened to us consecutive years. It was approved 1 year. We came back the second year to renew it and it was declined.
Again, Brian, I can't speak to the past.
I know, I'm just.
All we
I'm just
can do is
giving you
focus on
the
trying
I
to
don't
do
mean
better
to
in the future.
overwhelm you.
But I just like, Tim, if I could, I think the new process does exactly what you're asking for. One part allows an owner to come to the ARB with a concept. You know, for example, the Hutton house that burned down, you know, they came to us and they showed us a concept. The ARB is not in a position to approve a concept, but we said there's no reason that if you take this concept and do a full-blown architectural, whatever they do, that we would say no. And that's all that they were looking for. So that's one example. So within the document, it provides for conceptual review, and we have to figure out what the right word is, because it's not an approval, but it's an approval to move forward, right? So we'll figure out what that means, what that word is. So that's one part. The second part is that, you know, going forward, I think the document now is structured so that it's going to address some of the inconsistencies that you may have seen in the past. Now, only time will tell, right? And you'll have to be the judge of that. But I think going forward, it's going to be much more consistent than it has been in the past.
I have one final question. Now, I was never explained why that the conceptual plan, which did save time and money and was useful to the membership, why that was removed, if you know.
I don't. Jan, do you have an answer to that?
I think it was based on what he said at the beginning. We're trying to focus on additions. There are so few new houses that, but to get a final approval, you have to do everything in the application. And I think what Tim and Bruce both said, the administrative review is for people who present everything we've asked for. The forms are complete. It makes it very easy. So we are trying to eliminate people having to come back multiple times. So,
Anybody else have anything? Hey, Diane.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good.
Diane Keene, 73 Toppin. I was just hoping you could elaborate on the rule that's new as far as I could tell on the $250 fee for taking out a tree.
multiple things. Okay, people have complained, if you read through the guidelines that they've always been. If it's a specimen healthy tree, we basically in the past said no. You could not remove it. We're in a climate now where we're gonna get more storms. And in the past, we've been tough, administration's been tough about trees going down if they were leaning over a house, but healthy. Well, we've all seen what happens in storms. Healthy trees have come down because we've had so much water that the root ball will pull out. So what we are allowing is very similar to what Hilton Head Island has and what Beaufort County has. If there's a reason that you feel your property is not safe, and it's a healthy tree, you can take that tree out and you're gonna pay a fee. On Hilton Head Island, the fee is based on the diameter of the tree. And we're not gonna do it that way. We're just gonna say, if you feel, you know, and we're gonna have to look at it. We have to look and say that we're gonna let this happen. But the point is, then you're gonna pay a fee. It's gonna go into a separate fund. And we're gonna use those funds to help replace trees as they need to be replaced in the pecan grove. So it's not really a fine, it's just a different allocation so that we're gonna keep the same number. What we're trying to do is not make this a green grass community without trees. We're just trying to protect people if they're worried about a tree, but put the tree somewhere else in the community. And we do know we have pecan trees that have been damaged and are gonna need to be replaced. So did that answer your question?
My concern is that, for example, we had to take out 2 huge trees that were along the driveway. They had eaten under the driveway. We had to pull up the driveway. We had to repair the driveway. We had to repair the sod. It was expensive. And to throw another $500 on top of that, I don't see the need. We have several trees on our property. We have a lot of trees on our property. So the 2 that had to come out because our driveway was getting eaten and the driveway was now unsafe, I don't understand why, given those circumstances, they were healthy trees, too healthy. They were eating through the driveway. So why is there a fee that was trees that were approved by Moss Creek to remove? Why would I have to pay an additional fee?
If Moss Creek approved it, then you don't have to pay the fee.
That's not what you just said.
That's not how the guidelines write.
Right.
Either.
It says that you have to pay a fee. It does not say if it's approved, you can.
Have to replant.
I think it's there. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's not clear.
Is it a
I just
specimen
think the
tree?
way it's written is,
It said you had to replant the trees or pay a $250 assessment per tree. In the example that we sent an email to the board that I brought up what Diane just suggested. In this case, we had 2 trees that were taken down because it cracked the driveway and it had to repair the driveway.
But you got approval for that.
I
Yes.
did. If it
Okay.
was January first, would I pay another $250 per tree?
No, it's only if you don't get
But
approval.
that's not how.
Okay, we will look at it. We will look, if we haven't made that clear, that's the intent is if it's a healthy tree and we don't otherwise give approval.
Yeah, the Kings sent in that's one of the ones that Mr. Berry has for the
Okay.
ARB to review. Has that exact same.
But Beaufort County, I know most people don't read newspapers anymore, but if you had the newspaper, if you read it online, there's always controversy about developers wanting to take healthy trees down, and they have to pay a big fee, usually thousands of dollars. So we're trying to just follow that, what Hilton Head has and what Beaufort County has, but to a lesser degree.
but again, it would have to state in those rules that it's not approved trees.
Yeah, unapproved, healthy
I
trees.
don't think that was.
Okay, we'll
So
look
I
at
just
it.
need some clarification,
Yeah,
Jan.
we'll look at it.
And she had sent an email about that, so you guys should have that.
This is not, we're not trying to make thousands of dollars here.
Is this only specimen trees? or
Yes,
is it-
specimens.
So it's not like a pine tree or a water oak or something?
Well, some of those are specimens, like long leaf and
The guidelines say cone bearing trees.
what?
Cone bearing trees.
Coldberry.
Cone bearing, he says.
Those are mine.
I don't know. We'll look at it.
Yeah, that
Oh.
needs to be clarified.
So the intent is, and this is what we'll do next, we're gonna take all the suggestions and everything you guys wrote in your emails. We're gonna have a working session, we'll look at all that language and make sure that we change the guidelines to make sure it's specifically clear about each one of these issues. Okay,
Yeah.
anything else?
Susan, are there any questions on the Zoom? No, okay. Oh, hang on, Mr. Thorson, coming.
Yeah, there was, I submitted the second concern, and I don't, I'm bringing it up here because I didn't get a call back, and it wasn't, I didn't know if I was gonna get an explanation, so, anyway, the issue is, on part, on section 27, part 3. No, I'm sorry, section 3, ARB scope and building permit, it says the ARB is responsible for the review and approval and disapproval of all plans and details submitted for structures, landscaping, and et cetera. A few sections down, it's docks, bulkheads, and seawalls, and it says in no event shall Moss Creek Owners Association or the ARB be responsible for any damages arising from plans implemented for docks, bulkheads, and seawalls. Okay, it's curious, because, I know this topic extremely well. How does the ARB legally remove its liability from certain types of permits?
We're not giving permits for seawalls. You go to the county and.
Yeah, that's not, that's, as far as I know, that's not our responsibility, nor is the OCRM either.
Well, 4 years ago, the ARB approved a seawall to be put in here at Moss Creek. They had to get a local permit, which ARB issued, and it was, unfortunately, it was totally different than the county and the state permit. And the wall now has collapsed into a Peninsula Creek, as I think everyone knows. So you're not gonna issue any additional permits for that type of work for docks or seawalls?
I'm not sure we're allowed to issue permits for docks or seawalls.
No. Okay, well, that's been done in the past thoroughly.
Okay,
So these regulations have written, went past our council. And he has reviewed them. Now, if we make changes, then we have to go back, but he had a month. And he reviewed those. And we are proceeding on the documents that he reviewed.
I was just kind of curious that,
we'll take it into consideration.
I appreciate that.
Okay, your emails, so we'll take a look at that and make sure that we run it by legal and make sure we're not stating something that we're not allowed to state. Is that fair? Cause I really don't wanna talk about what happened 3 years ago or whatever, we're trying to figure out what we do going forward.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't know if you're gonna eliminate it. All right, that's fine. I just brought it up because it's still active situation. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Thorson's one of the emails that you've been
Yep.
given, yeah.
Yep.
I think you have one other thing on there about pond buffers, Mr. Thorson's.
Joseph Klein, for Royal Point. I had spent some time on the ARB, and this conceptual thing that you have, allowing this person to extend their garage and everything, you have to remember that Beaufort County has the final word. If you tell this guy, hey, you can extend your garage, and he takes his plans into Beaufort County, and they're on the easement, they're gonna knock it down.
Yeah, we wouldn't make it, we typically will not approve anything that's gonna be on an easement or over a property line or
Right,
anything else.
They
Typically,
have the final word on it.
yeah, typically what we're dealing with is people that wanna create something that might be a foot, 2 feet over a setback line.
Or a setback line.
Yeah, which
They
is,
won't allow it.
okay.
And
I
that's
don't
just from
think-
past experience when I was
Okay.
on the ARB. Now, maybe it had changed. But, the setback lines are,
But any kind of new construction, they have to get a permit.
right.
And just because we said we would allow an extension over a setback, doesn't
Right.
mean that they
It
will.
doesn't mean that they'll go through.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Klein.
Oh.
Other questions, comments?
No.
Sorry, Tim.
I'm sorry.
Again, a new thing that I spotted on the guidelines that I don't have a problem with, it's just the way it's written, it needs to be readdressed, is the
Okay.
5 potted plants per 25 square feet.
Okay,
That's, first of all, it's pretty arbitrary. Second of all, if you walk around, there's some beautifully landscaped homes that have way more than
Mhm.
I personally, I propagate plants. I have maybe 15 little pots that would be within 5 square feet. But they're little. Is that okay? Is that not okay? If I have 3 foot in diameter pots, is that okay? Is that not okay? The way the rule's written, it's very ambiguous at best.
okay.
I think that is, I'm not quite sure where that rule came from, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we'll take that up too. And I think, like Bruce said earlier, we can't possibly think of every situation that would happen and write a prescriptive rule to govern every single incident we might encounter.
But why
So,
are we counting potted plants?
um,
That doesn't make sense.
That's a good solution.
It's what I like versus what you like.
Right.
If I get plants that are a foot and a half around, I can put an awful lot of them on a patio.
So generally, what happens is, we don't make this stuff up. It's neighbors complain. And it's because, and I'm gonna refer to a house that was on Moss Creek Drive, the people recently sold. The woman started with a few potted plants, and by the time she moved, I believe she had hundreds. And that's not attractive to most of your neighbors. And that particular house, if you drive by, the people who bought it, got rid of all the plants, I mean, I think that house is much more attractive.
But again, if I have hundreds that are all in little 3-inch pots, is that not okay? It's such an arbitrary thing. There's no way you can enforce that.
People do not like a lot of yard clutter, so we've tried to put some definition of how much.
It's just way too arbitrary. There's no way, unless you go from house to house and say, you can't, and start pulling all those pots off people's lots.
So community pride does not write a letter for everybody who's got a pot, but if it looks like people are just filling their yard, then they're probably going to send you a letter. But personally, we're living in an area with lots of windstorms. We've had 2 really bad windstorms, one over Memorial Day weekend and one as Helene went by. And I would not, I mean, when we have a hurricane, we tell people, bring anything that is a missile inside. And I think somebody who wants to have a lot of pots is just asking for a lot of damage to their house. I certainly wouldn't want that.
And if you have any suggestions, maybe we can take it offline. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to say no pots, but we've had neighbors complain to us because people have moved in and just put all kinds of stuff all over their yard.
Again, I just think the way it's written,
Yeah,
Okay, so tell us how to word that.
I'll talk to them.
that's great. And Diane, I'll commit to you that we'll make sure we try to come up with something that's not completely arbitrary, because that's not fair. I agree. Okay. All right, I think that might be it. I really appreciate everybody coming and asking questions that I couldn't answer. Sorry about that. Some of them anyway. And Bruce, thanks again. You know, ARB meetings are open. If you guys need to come and discuss anything with us, we're happy to do it. And we promise we will continue our mission to try to make this easier, less costly, and less time consuming. Okay, thanks. Everybody.